Was a police officer behind them. The way the car parked behind them apparently was quite like a police officer. And another part of that theory that would make you think that perhaps this guy has some sort of inside with the police or is police is that according to Mike in Graysmith's book, the door handle on Graysmith's on the passenger side was removed and he couldn't actually get out of the car until the Zodiac opened the door to shoot him. But in the police reports, that door handle was then back, which would mean someone who had access to the crime scene, if that is to be believed.
Graysmith wrote a book about the Zodiac, and he mentioned in his book that I was at Darlene and her husband's house on a house painting party prior to her death, and I don't know anything about that. It wasn't me.
Dick Hoffman was the police officer who arrived on scene first before the rest of the cavalry rode in. He collected some of her items and waited for the ambulance and was told to ride with them to the hospital.
You knew her before the attack, right?
I never laid eyes on her.
You never laid eyes on her before the attack?
No. I'd heard that she was a waitress at an all-night restaurant in Vallejo, but I didn't know the girl at all.
Initially, there was obviously the thought that this was someone she knew. Some of those roads would have pointed, for obvious reasons, to her ex-husband, but there is a variety of other people that could have been involved. Darlene definitely was afraid of someone. In cases such as this, those closest to the victims are normally the ones who are investigated first, especially when there is not only a husband, but an ex-husband involved. And especially in this case where her ex-husband had a criminal record to beat. And Dean had said that she and her ex-husband had had a lot of issues throughout their time together, and he had even stalked her at times. Those closest to Darlene also talked about how her ex-husband was a strange character. All of this leading police to believe that was the best place to look, at least at first. All of those thoughts and ideas, though, quickly went out the window after one terrifying phone call.
Then the next call I got was about 12:40.
Vallejo Police Department.
I want to report a double murder.
Yeah, I have your
If you
name
go 1
and
mile
where you're
east on Columbus Parkway, a public park, you'll find kids in a brown car. They were shot with a 9mm Luger. I also killed those kids last year. Goodbye.
The lead investigator sent police to go and dust the phone booth for fingerprints. But even today, this would have been difficult as they found dozens and dozens of fingerprints that still have not been verified or identified. This was no easy task, especially in the 60s. Then the case's most famous signature would be introduced.
The killer now sent letters to 3 newspapers, the San Francisco Chronicle, the Examiner, and the Vallejo Times-Herald. They were the beginning of a flood of written evidence he would pour forth for years to come. He gave himself a name, Zodiac.
Doing such things as describing what the woman was wearing, enough details to tell the police that he was the man.
Or else.
If you do not print this cipher, I will cruise around all weekend, killing lonely people in the night until I end up with a dozen.
And what did that do to this community?
It terrified everyone. 3 newspapers gave their front pages to this man. I mean, that's how terrified they were.
In this particular code, the Zodiac used what we refer to as a common letter numeral substitution code, where you might substitute the letter C for E and A for B and et cetera, and et cetera. And coupled with that, he used some symbols that you might describe as being something like semaphore flags, where he'd take a square and color in half of it diagonally. Or he used some Greek symbols
The published codes stumped hundreds of amateur cryptographers and several intelligence agencies.
Police, the CIA, a variety of law enforcement and governmental offices tried to break the cipher that was given with these letters. But it was solved by an unlikely couple, a husband and wife who were teachers in San Francisco.
And finally, Donald Hardin and his wife, who just simply sat down and through sheer stick-to-itiveness worked around the clock. And they were the only ones, the CIA, Naval Intelligence, none of these people were able to crack this 3 cipher code. And this was, certainly for his wife, the very first attempt at any sort of cryptography. For Don Hardin, I think he'd done crossword puzzles. He had some various books on ciphers. But what they had begun to do is they looked for a double combination of symbols, the most common being a double L. And Mrs. Hardin thought that he would use the word kill. And so once they figured the word killing or kill was somewhere, and those were double L's that they were seeing throughout these ciphers, that eventually gave them the key to break it.
I like killing people because it is so much fun. It is more fun than killing wild game in the forest, because man is the most dangerous animal of all.
There's an interesting piece in the cipher which is about humans being the most dangerous animal of all, which is a quote from The Dangerous Game. And this definitely stood out to police officers and got them a little bit worried, because at the end of the day, that is a movie about a man who hunts humans, basically for sport. So a little bit worrying, that. Even with these letters, though, police essentially had nothing.
The status of the case is just about as it was. We're getting many, many letters and telephone calls and everything. There's no specific person that we suspect at this time.
And it was about to get much, much worse.
Napa's kind of a secluded community. We're bordered on both sides by major highways, Highway 80 to our east and Highway 101 to our west. And so we don't get a lot of the traffic coming through Napa that some of the other cities do. So we have a relatively low crime rate. We can sometimes go several years without a homicide.
Napa in those days would have been very quiet in terms of crime. However, that year there had been 5 or 6 homicides, which was quite unusual for the 60s in Napa. Lake Berryessa at that time of year was also extremely quiet. So this was an unusual day.
September 27th, 1969. For his new role of executioner, Zodiac chooses a peaceful setting in the heart of California's wine country.
Celia Shepard and Brian Hartnell, both in their early 20s, were sitting on this knoll of land overlooking part of Lake Berryessa. They thought they were alone, but there was a third man on this knoll, a man who wore a medieval-style executioner's hood, carried a knife and gun, and intended to use them.
They were approximately a quarter of a mile from the road, down near the waterfront, and they were laying out on a blanket, talking. They were schoolmates, and the subject approached them. They saw the subject come up by them.
I happened to hear some rustling behind us, and I asked her to look because she was facing that direction. I was facing toward the water, and I asked her to note, what was going on, and she said, "Oh, there's a man walking around there." And she became concerned about it, and I said, "Well, actually, don't worry about it. There's a lot of people, picnickers, etc. And just if he kept coming, let me know." And she kind of kept watching. I noticed she wasn't following my conversation. She told me he was stepping behind a tree, and the tree was about 30 feet behind us. And when he came out, she said he's got a mask on, and that was my first inkling that there was anything actually wrong going on.
They didn't think too much about it, and the next thing they knew, the subject was upon them with a gun and demanded the keys to the car and money.
And I actually laughed at the moment because I told him, I says, "I've only got 75 cents in my pocket." And I says, "You're welcome to have it." I considered him a robber. I had absolutely no thought that he was anything but that. And when we were at this robbery stage, I didn't consider any real threat to my life or to the girl or anything. I really didn't consider this, but I really wanted to help him.
He pulled some cuts of 3-foot lengths of clothesline. It's actually plastic. It's the kind that's hollow in the center.
The young man stated that, well, you can have my money. I've only got a few cents, 75 or 80 cents. And with this, he says, well, I'm going to tie you up. And he had the young lady tie her friend up, and then he tied the girl up.
He said, well, what I need right now is to get you tied up. And so he had the girl tie me, and of course she was real nervous and tied me rather loosely. And he came and he tightened the knots up, and then he tied her up. And we continued the dialogue along most of this time.
The kid said, the money's in my pocket. He said, I don't want the money, all I want to do is kill you. The boy asked him, said, you really mean that? And he said, yes, I mean it. Says, well, he said, if you're going to kill me first, because I can't stand to see the girl be stabbed. He said, well, I'll do that. So he started stabbing the kid in the back.
And laid him face down. And with this, he proceeded to knife both of them numerous times.
Still on his knees, the man gave a ghastly, frenzied sound and letting out a long, low exhalation, began stabbing the girl in the back. 10 times the knife fell. Instinctively, Cecilia rolled over on her back, and the dark hunter continued thrusting. Once he plunged the knife full length into her chest. Sated at last, the stocky man stood up and tossed the money and keys onto the blanket next to his victims. He walked slowly across the open peninsula and was soon lost in the empty twilight.
Brian will probably be able to leave Queen of the Valley Hospital fairly soon. But where he's going from here is being kept secret in the event that the man who attacked him and killed Cecilia Shepard on Lake Berryessa a week ago Saturday tries again. Brian made it for 2 reasons some people might regard as intangibles, but reasons that for him were enough: a strong faith and an equally strong will to live.
I was able to untie one of her hands, but she was too weak to untie me at that time. Finally, one fisherman who was going real slow, he stopped. He shut off his motor, and we cajoled and called, and we did everything to try to get him to come. And he sat there for about 15 minutes, and he did finally come closer, but he wouldn't come to the shore. I guess he was afraid that the man might still be around. He said he'd go get help. So I encouraged her enough to get me untied, and I got one wrist loose so that I could get the rest untied.
How were you finally found?
Well, she was found down on the blanket still.